my love of the physical world, the physicality, and how, you know, the everyday, just looking through that window at the street, and the way a wall can control somebody, the edge of a pavement can control something, a car going past, a cigarette butt, a bit of litter on the, you know, these things from the huge to the tiny make us use space in particular ways. That idea of space as a solid material also seems to me deeply fascinating, and absolutely nothing to do with illusion, you know, or lying. But you need to lie in order to translate that back into the theatrical space of a gallery. The Baltic is quite solitary there as a great lump of a building. And when you're up on that 4th floor, you seem to look both ways down the Tyne. It feels quite isolated up there on the 4th floor, actually, which I find very interesting as a gallery for sculpture. It's been a very exciting experience taking on this huge space, but I have no idea what the outcome is going to be.
One of the things that is very interesting about her work is the fact that the objects, as sculptural objects, are not static. It's not that there's movement particularly within the objects, it's that there is a notion of something being threatening in that it may collapse or implode or explode, or indeed, you know, is on the verge of one of these things. This interest in pushing the materials and methods to the limits of their kind of physical abilities is typical of Phylida's work.
I was trained with armature building, welding, stone carving, mould making, you know, the 5 sculptural crafts, and then it all just collapsed because I wasn't interested in working within that limitation. Even though that's got white emulsion on it, I want it to be absolutely known that it's a shambolic sort of collage of polystyrene and tape and scrim and plaster and papier-mâché. I'm not trying to make it look like something it isn't.
Phylida's work always exposes its framework and its backbone. She doesn't hide any of those underlying structures or armatures. There is no hidden part to the work.
There's got to be enough room for making decisions happen very spontaneously, and to not have a kind of guilt about things breaking and not working and all that kind of history of making that is actually enormously problematic. I actually want to make an exhibition where things arrive at some sort of conclusion. And that, of course, is in direct conflict with my preferred interest in process and the ebb and flow of process. When I'm up there on the 4th floor at the Baltic, things are going to have to be trial and error in 7 days, which is actually quite a short time. Mind you, God made the world in 7 days, sorry. my work is kind of content form led rather than subject led.
Most of the techniques of construction are in many ways about wrapping, gluing, sticking, shoving together, wedging. She's using a real experience and knowledge of materials, volume, weight, mass, but she's actually putting them together in a almost a homemade way.
I need to find out what materials do and to manipulate them, maybe in order to find an idea. I look at the polystyrene, huge polystyrene blocks in the builders' merchants, and it seems to me it's such a simple thing, and I wouldn't blame anyone for not being at all interested in it, but it seems to me sort of interesting that you've got this stack of paving slabs right next door to them, and 5 of those become unliftable. But you can take 5 great blocks of polystyrene and just put them on the roof of the car, and you've got this massive, great block of stuff, but it's light and quite fragile and all the rest of it. And there seems to me sort of something about that parody between the two things that I find quite intriguing. The idea of the block is something massive and heavy, and making it float up in the air on the end of these supports, and being able to play with the language of the block. I do feel it's very different from painting, where the act of looking at a painting, which I absolutely love, is one of the painting is on the wall. It's already occupying a very official institutional space. It's on the wall of a building, and you stand in front of it and you walk up to it and then you walk away from it. It's like a sort of backwards and forwards in a very particular kind of corridor space. If you do that with sculpture, you're missing something. The revolution that took place in the late 50s and the 60s was that was really through the questioning of materiality. Almost any craft that's used to support our everyday existence could also be appropriated for the making of an art object. It no longer had to be sanctified by the belief that sculpture was a thing that came into existence because it had used those sculptural techniques. I think all my work originates in clay. And when clay could no longer fulfill the size of the things I wanted to do, I turned to fabrics and upholstery foam in the 70s. And that became a malleable way of making things stand up without armatures, was through really solidifying fabric and upholstery foam to form these shapes. And so a lot of fabrics came with colours, so that introduced colour into the work almost by default, although I had been painting things way back in the 60s as well. The colour is connected with something to do with touch and clay. And it's originally, say, 10, 15 years ago, the colour was like the point at which I would depart from the work. It sounds very pretentious, but it was like saying, right now, this is the last thing that will touch this work, and after this, nothing else will touch it.
when it came to the painting, I think she found it really difficult to let go, because she doesn't have to think about it, she can just do it as an automatic action. Whereas for me to try to replicate that, it means that she's got to direct it.
I've had assistants for years helping me do it, but this is actually so completely detached from me having made anything here that it's gone the whole hog this time, you know, and that is a position that I'm trying to evolve, you know, for myself as to what I really think about myself.
The further it went, the more obvious it became that the action that I was using was really important, and now it's very specific instructions as to how to put the paint on. It's a naff analogy, but I feel a bit like a secretary typing somebody's novel for them, because, you know, I'm just literally just being the hands and they're being the head.
I'm just very full of anticipation and anxiety and nerves just about the business of getting into the space and making it all happen there. Yeah. That's the goal. So really at this point, who's actually making it? It doesn't seem terribly important to me that I'm not making it. But what does seem important is how we all make it retain a new energy and become a completely new experience that's nothing to do with this. Yeah. Now, I think that's what's really important. Today is quite a crunch day, I think, when lots of things must, in a way, come to a certain point of fulfillment, really, or completion, in order to then be able to really tighten up the work over the last couple of days. There are obvious references to architecture, it seems to me, a roof shelter. I don't actually know what architecture is. I'm completely bewildered by the urban environment and how it comes about to be what it is. These great constructions that are going up all around us, or roads that are slicing through these environments, don't create space, they annihilate space. They speak about space in a very particular kind of way, and then I look at the buildings and it's like a pack of cards, you know, and hence the sort of that structural look in my own work. I'm curious about enormity of structures that seem to have nothing to them. I'm not really seeing it as a sort of feud between architecture and sculpture. I'm seeing it more as what is the space that we're in between all those things, and I'm intrigued by that. Whether it's sculpture or architecture, these things act as obstacles, you know, and how we then engage with those obstacles is, I think, very emotional, you know, and political, actually, which I think is hugely important. Yes, I am interested in this thing called sculpture. Does it exist? Can I actually make something that has this sculptural quality about it? And if so, what is it? And to me, it is something about blockade, interruption, intervention. Yes, clumsiness, heaviness. And that's, again, where we get back to the line, because the things aren't heavy, you know, but they end up maybe looking like that. One of the things about sculpture for me is that in handling materials there's this thing that you can hang on to, which is a bit like, you know, hanging on to something that can actually, you can feel. You don't even have to look at the bloody stuff. You can just feel it and it's there. And it's like a moment of reality. And I think that's what I mean about that moment when the show goes up. There is just this one moment of reality where you see it, and it's almost in that moment you think, actually that's okay, or you think, oh Christ, no, I've missed it there. And you never really recover from that moment, you know, and it's incredibly fleeting. And I think that's what a lot of sculpture can be like. It's like a collection of those moments where you're grasping something and you're actually able to hold on to something.
In working with Phylida over the last 9 months to a year, my ideas about her work have been continually challenged, and I've been continually trying to address my thoughts towards the work and my understanding of the work.
I desperately want to come up with something that does have a conclusion to it. I'm not somebody who wants to come into the gallery every day and carry on the process. So I have a sort of problem with the word process, and then I have a problem with the word sculpture, and then I also have a problem with the word exhibition. So it's like I've constructed this fairly difficult occupation where all the usual givens I find difficult to accept, and yet I also collude with them. I am having an exhibition. I've had loads of exhibitions, and I mustn't pretend that I don't actually drive the work to a conclusion. I'm fascinated by that conclusion, but I also see it as a moment when, a very brief moment, when you see what you've done and that's it. It's almost after that I'm more than ready to walk away from it and say, okay, that was it. I want to get on with the next thing, maybe because certain things didn't quite work out in that, but I don't want to do them in that work. I want to do them in a new work.